So soon. Everybody, please mute your. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, you idiot.
Everything okay here? Okay, I will start. Hello and welcome to the international webinar Role and Position of Tourism During the Conflict and War. Before we begin, I would like to ask you to observe a moment of the silence for all the victims of the war, especially innocent women and children. I give now the word to the Mr. Timothy Marshall, Chairman of IIPT Board from New York. Timothy, please.
Freya, can we ask people to please mute again?
Yes.
Greetings, everyone assembled from various parts of the world for this most important webinar. I would like to begin by thanking Mr. Reza Soltani for his vision and leadership in bringing us all together. Yesterday, as I was reflecting on this session today, I received images from the Hubble Space Telescope, which provided an incredible look at 5 galaxies as they merged into a single star group. This will culminate in about 1 billion years. The images were astonishingly beautiful, but the message is even more profound. If 5 different galaxies can find a peaceful path towards merging into one star, why can't we as human beings find a path towards global peace on this one beautiful planet called Earth? So for a brief time of reflection and prayer, I would like to ask your consideration of 2 gifts we might offer in support of the beautiful Ukrainian people. The first is a biblical psalm that I will offer as a prayer in unity with their deep, abiding faith. The second is a poem of faith. It is a poem about courage and determination in the face of great evil and power. So first, please join me in taking a listen to the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. And last, a poem by the renowned Dr. Maya Angelou, and it is from the African American Struggle and Experience. It is entitled, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Just like moons and suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts my ancestors gave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Blessings to the Ukrainian people.
Thank you so much, Timothy. I would like to thank all our viewers from around the world who are watching and following us, who are more than thousands from different platforms on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, on our website. Thank you so much for being here. Also, a special thanks to Dr. Ludo Amor, President and the founder of the IIPT, and Mr. Sergei Mirnoga, the President and the founder of the Chernobyl University, who is in Kiev now. Thank you for being here. I give now the word to our wonderful moderator today, Dr. Steve Knox from Sydney. Steve, please.
Thank you, Reza, and welcome everybody to this webinar today in whichever part of the world you are in. I'm on the east coast of Australia. It's just after 10 p.m. at night time in my part of the world. And I know there are people with us. It's very early morning for you. But this is a webinar that reflects how tourism can bring people together and not tear people apart, as we see, unfortunately, in many parts of the world all too often. And of course, the horrific scenes are now coming out of the Ukraine. My job as moderator will be just to guide our speakers. We're looking at around 10 minutes maximum per speaker. If you have questions, please just put them in the chat box. We'll go through each of the speakers first, and then Reza and I will consolidate and coordinate if there's question and answers at the end. Overall, we expect the duration to be about 90 minutes, subject to the question and answer session. Our first speaker tonight, we are enormously honoured to have Mariana Oleskiv join us as the chairperson of the State Agency for Tourism Development in Ukraine. Mariana, may I hand across to you to say some words to our gathering tonight. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you and talking about tourism that actually should be something very peaceful and about connecting of people. But unfortunately, we are talking in this very hard times of the barbaric war that Russia started in Ukraine. Actually, past few years, despite the COVID pandemic, Ukrainian tourism industry was showing sign of recovery, and we expected more tourists to come in 2022. new markets that we were opening during previous year had a pretty good forecast from all of the experts. But those plans were totally ruined on February 24th, when Russia launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine by land, air, and sea, trying to ruin our peaceful life, our peaceful cities. Historic buildings, museums, killing innocent people, innocent children. What we've seen during these almost 2 months, something that most of people could never see happening now in 21st century. In 2022, cruise missile attacks on residential neighborhoods, kindergartens, hospitals in the heart of Europe. And this is not tourism, but some kind of so-called tourists are coming to our land and pay for this in thousands of lives of their own people, of Russian soldiers. Meanwhile, the price of the Ukraine pays is incredibly too big. It's thousands of civilians, tens of thousands of civilians killed, murdered, tortured in beautiful towns, historical buildings, and that destroyed our cultural and touristic heritage. At the moment, but despite this, I don't know, morning and night, when we all woke up understanding that there is war outside, Ukrainian society came together in a joint action to win this war. And tourism industry, hospitality industry was not somehow different in those terms. And our support of our partners worldwide, this shoulder we could lean on, was very important for us. Whole civilized world efficiently helping Ukraine, providing humanitarian aid and defensive aid, and hosting people in their homes, Ukrainian refugees who didn't want to leave the country. And for most of the people, it's not the chance to stay. Everyone is waiting for the moment they can come back to their home. But at the moment, this time when they can come back depends on when the war will be stopped, when the peace will be again on Ukrainian land. And so what we did, all of Ukrainian hospitality industry, is hosting people in their hotels, in their apartments, in their private houses. Restaurants started cooking for Ukraine, cooking for our army, our volunteers, our territorial defense units, for those people who cannot, at the moment, they lost their homes and they have no place they could cook for themselves, to provide them the help. And again, we start talking with the whole world tourism industry, what world can do now. And we see a lot of help in humanitarian aid. But this is another thing that we need to do, because there is no other way to bring peace to Ukraine and the whole world if we don't stop the threat we are facing. And at the moment, the threat is has its name, it's Russian Federation. So basically, there are two ways to end this war, because diplomatic way, of course, is important, but we've seen the diplomatic way of stopping this war didn't starting for Ukraine and actually for the whole world on 24th of February. It started earlier. It started in 2014 when Crimea was annexed, when part of our Donetsk and Luhansk region were annexed. And in those times, the world didn't pay too much attention to that. And there were peaceful agreements with Russia, but we see what they are worth starting from February 24th. So to stop Russia now, we need two things. We need weapons, and we need economic collapse of the country. So what tourism industry can do now, of course, is stop in any cooperation with Russian Federation, because this is it's a Nazi state. We can see it from the genocide that they were committing here in Ukraine. There is a big evidence of their crimes, and they are being now prosecuted by international teams. But the other thing, we need to think what we will do next. And at the moment is not, sometimes people think maybe it's too early to think about what's next, because the war is not over. It's still going on in its active phase. But we have liberated areas at the moment, and we see already these scars left by war on those territories that needs to be healed, and they needs to be showed to the whole world, because this after-war tourism is not only about visiting the country, because it's a beautiful country. We still have our mountains, we still have our beautiful sea, but now we have something we didn't have before the war. We have those sites that show us Ukrainians, like domestic tourism, and that they show world, they can show world about crimes, war crimes that were committed, and those that can bring us to the understanding that this war should not be repeated anytime later. And we are confident that very soon Ukraine will prevail and open the doors for tourists again. And we understand that tourism in Ukraine is going to change extremely. And there will be absolutely new senses, new purposes of the trip, new destinations, and even new types of tourists who would like to come. There will be a lot of people who want to understand the nation, the bravery that stopped this. They didn't give us many experts, 2 or 3 days.
When was the last time
Because of the bravery, we are now liberating our territories, and we are bringing back peace there. And right now, we work with the community, with the ministries, others, to commemorate this war, and to commemorate territories and these new sites, and to create this path of memorizing the war, about the memory of the war, with a message, never again, to stop this, that they will never repeat such crimes. And we do hope that people from all countries could visit and see those sites, and then in the future, maybe one day Russia will become a democratic country, and they would bring their kids from the schools to those sites, so they see what their ancestors did, like what they did, and they would not repeat it. And of course, another aim is to show the courage of Ukrainian people who are fighting the whole world, of all European countries. Ukrainians who are fighting to protect actually the world from evil, not only themselves. And that was written in the movies and in the books, but now it's here in real life. And we had a previously successful promo campaign, Ukraine Now, Visit Ukraine Now, to show how incredible our country is. And there is now new census, a new campaign started by the government of Ukraine, which is transferred to Brave and Ukrainian bravery. And now you can see this campaign already in many cities worldwide, where we want to show to everyone that you need to be brave like Ukraine when you need to make some decisions to stop this war, to arm Ukraine, to stop cooperating with Russia, to understand that there will be no Russian tourists, rich Russian tourists pretty soon with those sanctions, and to find new ways for the tourism development. And Ukraine is open and will be open for visitors to see the beauty of our country. And it's important for us now all together to work on how tourism industry will transform worldwide, because those war in Ukraine doesn't only matter in Ukraine, in tourism in Ukraine or only neighboring countries. There are a big chain of things that influence on actually almost every country, more or less. And there is a new ways, new market that should discover every country. And then when we win and when this horrible war will be stopped, we hope for the support of all of you to recover and to renew tourism in Ukraine. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Mariana, thank you very much for your very courageous words. And I know that we have many of your country people on the broadcast tonight also listening in. So we also send our best wishes to you in this very, very difficult stage. The intention tonight was to have all the speakers and then have all the questions lined up in the chat room. But we appreciate your time. So I think in your case, if we've got any, Reza, can you help me? If we've got any questions in the chat specific for Mariana at this stage, so we don't hold Mariana up if she needs to move on to other things today. Are there any, Reza, can you help check in the chat if there's any specific questions for?
There are not really specific questions at the moment, but
okay.
I don't know how long Mariana may be able to stay with us.
I'm available until 4:15, so I'll be here with you, and then later before I leave I can text there in the chat. Okay. So if there will be some questions, I will answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, much appreciated. We'll move on to
Steve, you don't mind, I just want to say just something I forgot about the poster that we use. As everybody see, that's a beautiful, lovely city of Odessa. And as you see, the brave Ukrainian people, they have put the sandbags front of all those cultural heritage sites to not be destroyed. So they are really doing whatever they can to defend their cultural heritage. And that's the symbol of the people who are in such a difficult time trying to keep their culture. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we'll move on to our second speaker, Ben Sherman. Ben's the chairman of the World Indigenous Tourism Alliance. He's based tonight out of Denver in the USA. Ben's made a major contribution around the world, particularly in Indigenous tourism issues. And I'm going to ask Ben to say a few words now. Thank you, Ben. Ben, you have to unmute.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to see everyone here. I wanted to say to begin with that the Indigenous tourism carries some time-honored values of hospitality that are embedded in ancient cultures and hosts to guests relationships among Indigenous communities worldwide, demonstrate values of welcoming, respect, sharing, and protection. It has been said that guests traveling into Indigenous territories are treated with the care that a host would provide for family members. Now, since 2008 in the Netherlands, I have been a member of the International Institute for Peace Through Tourism family. Lou Damour, founder and president of IIPT, invited me to participate in a few of his peacemaking endeavors around the world. I helped Lou plant a peace tree near Victoria Falls in Zambia and visited the sacred river Jordan with Lou. And hello to Timothy and to Gail, part of this group here. My intention here is to focus mostly on conflicts and disputes involving Indigenous communities around the world. Because Indigenous populations tend to be small and limited geographically, their impact of their conflicts have minimal effects on broader world tourism. But in the indigenous areas where violent conflicts are occurring, localized tourism is affected. Indigenous communities involved in conflicts usually have little or no desire to participate in tourism activities. Conflict has come into my country, my homelands, from time to time. My people were Lakota from Chief Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. And we were the last tribal nation in the United States at war with the country. The final assault on my people was a massacre at a place called Wounded Knee in 1890. Fast forward to the year 2016, when a group of young members of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, all Lakota, embarked on a peaceful protest that opposed the construction of an oil pipeline from Canada into the United States to be drilled under Lake Oahe on Standing Rock lands. The project was called the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, as the pipeline moved closer to the lake, the resistance movement gained momentum. People in large numbers from all across the United States and from other nations around the world joined the Lakota people at Standing Rock. Government law enforcement, armed contractors, mercenaries brought their violence against the unarmed and peaceful Lakota. Numerous protesters were injured by the violence. President Trump was elected and the resistance was quelled. I tell this story because it introduces a common theme of powerful forces aligned against Indigenous people to lay claim to their territorial lands and waters and natural resources. This story is repeated throughout the world in places such as the Philippines, Indonesia, India, countries in Africa, South America, and Central America, among other places. Now, tourism generally does not have the authority or desire to intervene in Indigenous land conflicts, especially where there is violence. Armed violence by powerful government and private corporations cannot be abated by tourism, no matter how dedicated they may be. Here is my last words about a small location in Uganda. On a hike through the Bwindi Impenetrable National Forest in Uganda, the songs the Batwa sing for tourists are supposed to be celebratory, but they are mournful. They are in praise of a good honey harvest, but there is no harvest as the Batwan are no longer allowed to gather honey or anything else from the forest. Instead, these Indigenous people take groups of paying tourists into their ancestral lands and in a choreographed performance, act out how they once lived. They were removed from their traditional lands in the interest of conservation. Now this is-
How are you? Hi, how are you? I'm early. Take your time. Excuse me. No problem.
In conclusion, tourism benefits from peace, of course, a simple enough fact. To a certain degree, tourism can also be a generator of peace, but not always. Although some do our best to bring about peace through tourism. And of course, tourism is absent in war zones and is greatly diminished in areas of conflict and dispute, just as I described with Indigenous communities. Thank you for your kind attention, people.
And thank you very much for your wise words and your perspectives of Indigenous tourism around the world. These are communities in most places have had to deal and manage conflict from outside forces over many centuries. and we see very good signs of resilience from Indigenous communities all over the world in their ability to come back after a significant crisis, such as a major conflict that unfortunately we continue to see in different parts of the world. We're going to move on now to Dr. Freya Higgins Dabiol, who's based in Adelaide, Australia. And Freya has made a significant contribution in the literature to issues that relate to our topic tonight. And a reminder that our topic tonight is the role and position of tourism during conflict and war. Of course, we've started with Mariana's contribution from the terrible situation happening in Ukraine, but our discussion tonight from our various presenters is looking at a broader picture also. And I'll hand across to Freya now to say some words. Thank you, Freya.
Thank you, Steve. And let me know if I go over time, please. I'm grateful to be here, and I'd like to honor Ben's words. I'll say I'm in Adelaide, I'm on Kaurna country, and I'll acknowledge Kaurna care for this country. It's something we do in Australia. This is a colonized land. It was never ceded. And the Kaurna people are people with a peace philosophy, which, if listened to, could inform our practices of thinking about managing conflict and working towards peace. I want to share with you some of my thinking. Particularly, I worked on a course on peace through tourism together with a colleague named Dr. Linda Blanchard, who was with the University of Sydney. And together we created the world's first master's course in peace through tourism. And our efforts were about bridging the knowledges of peace and conflict studies together with tourism studies, and we worked with students through that. In our efforts, we particularly focused on two concepts from peace studies, which may be helpful for our thinking here. One is the idea of a pedagogy of peace, which could help us think through how tourism might serve our mission of fostering more peaceful relations. It's an idea that there are dialogues across divides and conflicts. So it particularly emphasizes this idea of dialogues rather than hard positions. We created a book from our work, I think it was 2014 with Routledge, about peace through tourism with the idea of it fostering international citizenship. And that book was informed by practitioners that were doing the work, like the Peace Boat, which is a Japanese organization formed in 1985 that uses a cruise ship to go around the world and campaign against conflict, and particularly against nuclear weapons and nuclear industries, bringing the hibakusha, the survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, to communities to speak about how we must avoid conflict. It also included the Alternative Tourism Group of Palestine. It included Equations from India, which campaigns around human rights, and Tourism Concern, which some of you may know about. And what we were talking about here is this idea of the keys being listening, learning, and then dialogue. So in that order. And then the other informing that we had was Professor Stuart Rees, a professor of peace studies, talked about the idea of peace with justice. So peace in this case is not a feel-good PR thing. It's about getting to the root causes of conflict. So peace with justice is needed to bridge conflicts. Peace with justice brings us to truth-telling. Sometimes tourism academia and tourism authorities don't like this truth-telling because it gets necessarily political. As we look at the initiatives to assist Ukraine and Ukrainians after the invasion on the 24th of February, what we see are some really amazing things that people use the facility of Airbnb to get money to Ukrainians. Hotels were opened up for the refugees coming through, free railway fares going across Europe to help people flee. All the stops were pulled out. But I think we need some critical questions. I've been watching my news about Ukraine and feeling really terribly every evening. But I've also looked at Twitter and I've seen people in my networks, Black and brown people, talking about suffering the impacts of conflict, not being afforded the same hospitality, and actually following the same routes of fleeing that Ukrainians have followed. So for instance, I'm thinking about Syrians who needed safety from the war in Syria. So my questions are, why are refugees still stuck at Calais in the jungle? Or why are refugees washing up on the shores of the Mediterranean? And yet we're not appealing for them in the same way. Why are we not appealing for Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Afghanistan, Papua, Southern Sudan, Palestine? Why are they not on our lips the same way as Ukraine? And what if we ask about these peace pedagogies to ask for voices from the majority world who stand with Ukraine? The voices from the majority world do stand with Ukraine and against injustice, but their conflicts, their issues, their suffering don't register. And I'll draw attention to that. That's racial violence. So the words that we need to bring to our lips are things like anti-imperialism, decolonization. Why don't we have an effective UN? The UN's been hamstrung. Why don't we have global solidarity? I'll move to Professor Stuart Rees again. The idea of peace with justice is a way so that we can all enjoy peace and that we look at the well-being of all in the global community. Stuart Rees said a just peace would be marked not only by the end of hostilities between peoples, but also by fairness in social, economic, and political arrangements. The real crisis that we're confronting is global climate change. So while we're supporting Ukraine, we're also facing scientists, 1,000 scientists, standing up with scientist rebellion, talking about drawing attention to the crisis, the catastrophe that we're facing, and getting arrested. And in fact, the invasion of Ukraine can be seen as a last grab for the resources on a dying planet. A lot of the conflicts that we're seeing go to this. So when we talk about tourism's role in these big global issues that I'm interested in, what we have to ask ourselves is, what are we talking about with tourism? What kind of tourism? I don't think Airbnb is going to bring us what we need. But if we look at the kinds of tourism that I've called tourism as a social force, or what Stephen Wearing has called decommodified tourism, where we see social tourism that supports people, accessible tourism that looks at everybody getting the opportunities of tourism, and we look at the forms of tourism that support communities, then we get peace at the grassroots. The change that we need is going to come from the grassroots. It's not going to come from the geostrategic power players. And the language that we have against China and against Russia in the global community with hostilities of creating implacable barriers is not going to create the structural justice that we need. So we need to get to a way to talk about, how do we create a world order where the UN works and we come together to share the resources, and particularly that we come together to deal with climate change, which is an existential threat. Nothing of what I say is taking away from the bravery of the Ukrainian people in resisting invasion, but there are other people also fighting these fights, and we need to stand with them. There needs to be widespread solidarity, and that's what I would advocate. Tourism can play a role in support of that, and I'm really glad to be discussing these ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Freya, for your considered and challenging issues that you've raised. And it's in a forum like this tonight, it's important that we look at the broader global picture on issues relating to tourism and conflict. So if you have any questions on Freya's comments, please just pop them in the chat, write them in the chat room. May I just remind everybody also to ensure you have muted your audio so we don't get the background noise. I'll move now on to Aziz Abu Sara. As he's in Jerusalem tonight, Aziz has made a significant contribution in his part of the world, and in fact, globally, as a peace builder and cultural educator. His work is well known in various leading international publications and forums, and he continues to be at the forefront of peace reconciliation efforts in a number of conflict zones. Aziz, may I invite you now to say some words?
Sure. Thank you, Steve, and It's great to see some good friends. Hello, Talib. Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for having this conversation, and I'm very grateful.
Always good to see you. Always good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here, to be part of this dialogue. I came to travel industry from the conflict resolution world. I worked in conflict resolution at a university for a few years. I worked in different conflict zones around the world, from Afghanistan to Syria to Colombia to Palestine, all these places. And I learned through my work there how ignorance, how lack of knowledge is one of the main things that helps misinformation and eventually lack of communication and leads to hate. And it's something that I remember reading Martin Luther King Jr. saying, men often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they cannot communicate. And they cannot communicate because they are separated. And everywhere I've worked on conflict resolution, conflict negotiations, I found this to be true, that our ignorance, our lack of knowledge has been one of the main causes of conflict, of wars, because whether politicians or forces that use that lack of knowledge, that use that fear to make us hate each other and eventually being willing to kill each other. And we definitely see that today in Ukraine and the whole propaganda around the war that's happening in Russia, where people who getting fed certain information to promote fear. And this what brought me actually into the travel industry, because travel is one of the best ways to counter that misinformation, to counter that ignorance, to introduce people to each other, to realize that there is more that bring us together. Actually, Martin Luther King Jr. again said, we are so much more powerful together than we are divided, and realizing that we can be that is through the travel industry itself. And I know it sounds sometimes crazy when I talk about this, but there are, before the pandemic, almost 1.5 billion people travel internationally in 1 year. And if those 1.5 billion people travel in a way that made them meet the other that they might be afraid of, the other that they don't know, the other that they have all these stereotypes about, imagine what kind of world we would be living in today. So this is what brought me into this conflict, but also is because I grew up into this work in tourism. I grew up in a conflict zone. I grew up in Jerusalem, and I remember tourists coming to my city, and I went to a school where tons of tourists would pass by, and I was 6 years old, and back in those days I was still a little cute kid, and I would pose for these tourists because I thought it's fun for them to come and take my photos. But after they took my photo, that was pretty much the full engagement. They would not have a moment to talk. They would not have a moment to understand, to realize what does it mean for someone to live in a place like Jerusalem? What does it mean for a Palestinian kid to grow up in that place? And this is what I wanted to correct, and where I think we all need to work to correct in the travel industry. As I've heard from the other speakers before, there's so much that often tourists miss when they travel. And instead of making tourism as an act of diplomacy, an act of dialogue, an act of peace building, it too often remains into the ignorance kind of industry. So what I've been working on in the last 15 years is trying to do that, to rethink of tourism as an industry of diplomacy, an industry of peace making, an industry of helping, rather than an industry that continues kind of the blind spots and ignorance that where we don't know really what's happening around us. So, and we know today that there are so many more people interested in this kind of travel. We know there are so many people asking for sustainable travel, to hear stories, to understand the people who live in the places where they are traveling, to step out of their comfort zones, to be willing to correct maybe even some of the misconceptions and stereotypes that they have. Ibn Battuta, an Arab traveler, said, "Travel makes you speechless. but then it turns you into a storyteller. And I love this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, because what it does, it tells us that travel isn't only about sightseeing, it's about understanding the people and the places where we travel.
There's
Hearing,
Aziz.
yes. I'm sorry. So it helps us understand that it's more about the people, not only the sightseeing, not only about the places we go to. And stories are the one thing that sticks with us. Stories is the one thing that we remember. I meet people who traveled with me 10 years ago, and when I ask them about what's still there in their memories, very few people go naming sites. Almost everyone will name a person they met, a story they heard that has transformed them, that has stayed with them, that have made them think of that place, make it real for them. And that's true about conflict issues, conflict zones. When I take people to places like Jordan, we don't go just to Petra, we don't go just to Jarash. We go and meet with Syrian refugees. We go and hear their stories, not just seeing them from far and taking photos of them, which is very easy in this world to also misunderstand peace tourism to make it a poverty tourism, which is totally the opposite. It's not seeing people and taking photos of them, but rather really engaging in dialogue with them, making sure they are benefiting from the travel industry. And I remember one example of these meetings of bringing tourists to meet with a Syrian who ended up writing a letter telling the people who are coming to meet her, what does it feel like to be a refugee? And this is a story that I keep hearing again and again from people who met this young girl who was 14 years old, who hosted us in her home again and again. Back in the day, she was 14, now she's in her early 20s. And she wrote this letter that says, "To whom it may concern, these words I read every day on my United Nations HCR asylum seeker certificate. I'm a Syrian child. The only thing I hope in the world is to wake up from this terrible nightmare and to return to my friends, to return to my life, to my home before this war. And if the time goes back, I just want to play with the people who lost their lives. And I will ask them to leave Syria. I never thought that I would live in a tent, but that's all right. I never thought that I would not listen to my English teacher whom I love so much in Syria, but that's all right. I never thought that I would not breathe the smells of Syrian fields in the summer night, but that's all right. But to whom it may concern, please stop war and let me go back to my past life." These kind of stories, these kind of engagements is what make people understand also what does it mean to live in a conflict zone? What does it mean to be a refugee? And those who I know who met Anwar, now when they hear what's happening in Ukraine, they know what it's like. They understand what it feels like to be a refugee, wanting to go back to your home. What does it mean to be a little girl not being home, seeing people and their families being killed or separated from? That's something that travel industry actually can do and can step in and not be only an industry of recreation, but an industry of education. I was recently in Poland after the war in Ukraine started, and I've met quite a lot of Ukrainian refugees over there. And I was amazed, one, by the spirit, by their optimism despite everything that is happening, amazed at the similarities between what they were telling me and what I've heard from refugees from Venezuela and refugees from Syria and from other places. But I also was amazed of how the travel industry, just like we heard earlier in Ukraine, they've stepped in and taken on refugees. So did they do also in Poland, where the travel industry also opened up some hotels and took on some refugees until they figured out where they're going to be settled. I was amazed by families who, instead of listing their homes on Airbnb, decided to take refugees on in their homes. These are incredible stories and shows the power of the travel industry beyond than just how much more profit can we make. It shows how much the travel industry can support in times of conflict. And it also puts a responsibility on us, travelers, people who work in the travel industry, to support those who are stepping up. And not to say, I've heard quite a few people saying, I wouldn't travel to any of these countries close by Ukraine because it's uncomfortable or it's too dangerous, which is, I think, debatable, not accurate at all. This is the time to travel because you want to support those kind of industries. You want to help bring refugees into the travel industry in the countries close by to Ukraine, because this is one of the few industries that people can come in without too much training. And we know millions of refugees gonna need jobs right now. So there's so much that the travel industry still can do. And there's so much that we are able to do in the current crisis, right? We cannot maybe travel to Ukraine right now, but we still can help so much. And as soon as it is possible to travel to Ukraine, I think it is important that we do go, not just, again, as we heard before, not just to go and visit and see places, but to really engage, to really learn what's happening, to really be supportive, to make sure our money that we spend is going to support the country to build back up and not to be absent from that place. I know I tell people today that I run trips to Bosnia 20 some years after the war there has ended, and people tell me they're afraid to go. I run trips to Northern Ireland. People tell me they're afraid to go, even though there's no fear whatsoever security-wise. And I hope that doesn't happen with Ukraine. I hope tourists realize that us traveling to there, if we do it right, if we're traveling to engage, if we're traveling to have dialogue, if we're traveling to learn, to live with the people, to help rebuild the country by being there, realizing that, I hope we don't just stay away and say, oh, we'll wait for 20, 30 years when the country is more built up, then we will go there. So I'm very grateful again to be here, and looking forward to seeing this war end, for Ukraine to prevail, and for us to be able to go and visit one day.
Aziz, thank you very much for your wise words. Very, very meaningful to our discussion tonight. Before we move on to our next speaker, Eugenia, I'm just going to pause and check if Mariana is still with us. And if so, given the content of the previous speakers, Mariana, is there anything you'd like to comment on, given the contributions of the speakers so far?
Yes, I'm very grateful for Aziz, for previous speaker, for really making good points. And it's really strange for all of us that in the time when technologies actually rule the world, when we can travel and see any country without invading it, and cooperate with anyone, why should you, I don't know, try to get another piece of land when you have the biggest piece of land in the world? And actually, when we talk about war in Ukraine, this is not that we think all other wars that were going on or are going on don't matter. Just we see in this case, for example, with exactly Russia and Soviet Union, when there was a World War II, Russian soldiers, when they were since 1939 and 1941, they invaded one part of Ukraine, and that was not under Soviet rule. And their soldiers did exactly the same crimes they did in Bucha and Irpin. Then there was a Chechnya war with exactly the same strategy of eliminating cities, killing civilians, killing people of this country in order to make them listen to them. Yes. Then was Georgia. Also this near part of Moldova, part of Georgia, the Armenia, Azerbaijan territories. Then we have Crimea in Ukraine, then we have Syria. And here we really, UN needs to work, of course, because at the moment it's just an organization that gathers and talks and deeply concerns. But the whole, it's not about tourism industry, it's about the whole world of peace and politics. There should be changed. When we talk about refugees from Ukraine, just a little comment about other problems like COVID maybe and global weather change. I don't think we can compare this to really like killing people and torturing them. This is completely different. This is something we can influence and we need to do day by day, step by step. But worse, this is something different. When we talk about Ukrainian refugees and that they are welcomed maybe in some countries, first of all, these are mostly neighboring countries that had good connection with people even before. And a lot of people, for example, from Ukraine, they work in Poland, they visit Poland, they are tourists in Poland. And I think it would be vice versa to any neighboring country when your neighbors, they were started and they were both under, we know what is totalitarian regime of Russia, Soviet Union, all of these countries. And we all understand this threat. And because of, I think this is the core question for all of us to understand more each other, not depending if the country is far away from us or is close to us. And it's just about how we are. When we have neighbors, we know what's going on there. When there is another continent, we think this war is somewhere far, yes? And at the moment, as Ukraine, of course, we have a big support of European Union countries, and we don't have such a good support maybe of all the countries in Asia, because they think it's somewhere far. But when we think so, if we think this way, there will be some war close to us. So I think here we need to be united in the term that any kind of war, any type of war, any type of conflict need to be solved, of course, peacefully in the best way. And the best thing we can do via tourism to educate people, young people, when they travel, to teach them to be peaceful in their minds. And using this moment, I would like to answer some of the questions I've seen there. So about the strategy of tourism, of course, it will be changed and significantly, I think. At the moment, as I was telling, we are trying to commemorize those places that the whole world have seen. For example, the bridge of Irpin, that were refugees hiding there when Russians were shooting children, women. There were the cars with the signed children that were shooted. And then we, of course, would be showing Ukraine as a part of the war, but then we need to show other places that were not touched by the war. And to develop the strategy will take some time, because you need to have a lot of stakeholders. Like a lot of people want to save some of the destroyed buildings, but local citizens, they want to build something new to forget about war. So there need to be dialogue inside the society to decide how we later retranslate it for outside. So it's going to be a long way. We are now making first steps, but it's all is ahead. The medical tourism, of course, it was a big part, and we will develop it, and all types of tourism that were developed and were popular before war, we will develop them again with the new types adding. And about banning Russian tourists, the only reason and of that is that we believe the people who can change the attitude of their country are people who live in that country. We Ukrainians are the people who fight for our freedom. And when we had a possibility of dictatorship president to become to change the path we chosen for the freedom, democracy, and European way of development. Then we had protests inside of the country. There were police trying to beat us, but people were protesting, still keeping protesting, and we kick out that president. He's now hiding somewhere in Russia. So we understand that we need to stand for ourselves, as in every country. And for Russian people, they don't understand yet. They are so full of that propaganda that they think they are doing something right. They are saving someone, even though no one needs to be saved in the worldwide. This is the Nazis. New Nazis will kind of call them that they fight Nazism, but being Nazis themselves. So when you ban, when you don't cooperate with them, that's something that brings them to the understanding that if the whole world doesn't support what they are doing, they need to change their country and they need to change the way they chosen to the democratic one. So in those terms, this banning of Russian tourists would work, of course. And when we talk about tourism to Russia or anything, this is economic ban that will not finance Russia to buy more weapons to kill more Ukrainians, or not only Ukrainians, Syrians and other countries, they start conflicts. Just for us is, of course, for every country, number one for the citizens in there, what is going on now. But we understand they won't stop here. If Ukraine fails, there will be somebody next. Who is next? We don't know. So thank you again. Sorry, maybe for emotion, but you know, we're like close.
We understand, Mariana. Thank you very much for your comments. Once again, in the interest of time, I'll move on to our next contributor. Is from Oxford in the UK, Professor Eugenia Wickens. And Eugenia is a sociologist, and her studies have got her deep into the field of conflict and peace through tourism. Eugenia, may I invite you for a few words now? You might have to unmute.
Okay.
Ask them to do you want to share the screen?
I would like to share the screen. I've got a PowerPoint presentation.
Reza, are you controlling the share screen?
Yes, you can, please. Go ahead.
So, Reza, okay, Eugenia's got it. Okay, we can see Eugenia.
Yes, you can see. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for this invitation to give a talk about the role and position of tourism during conflict and war. And it's a very moving time for all of us. Okay, first, as I said, I would like to thank Mrs. Sultani and all the organizers of the webinar. And in my view, it's better to live together in peace. The theme is examined from a social perspective because my background is sociology. Can tourism serve as a prime tool for world peace? And the central focus is on the relationship between peace and its role during conflict and war. The nature of tourism, as we heard from previous speakers, is, however, very complex. Tourism for peace, it implies positive impacts on society and economy, a force for peace and cultural understanding. Adopted by the United Nations as a universal goal to ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. It is an acknowledgement, of course, of the significance of tourism. But recently, as we all know, the role of tourism is gone into question. War, conflict, insecurity, weak institutions, COVID-19 remain a threat. A number of people escaping war and conflict exceeded to 18 million in 2021, and I reckon will probably be about 85 now if we're counting the Ukrainians. The war in Ukraine threatens, of course, to increase and exploit instabilities across the globe. So what is the role then and position of tourism during the war and conflict? Two opposing orientations. One claims tourism can work for us, and the other sees tourism as an evil that generates conflicts and fundamentalism. However, these two opposing views are best seen as the ends of a spectrum of opinion with a variety of views somewhere between them. The peace through tourism discourse has been appropriated by politicians and the industry to advance their own vested interests. The counter-argument, of course, is put forward by those thinkers who draw our attention to the perceived evils of globalization. How tourism contributes to world peace is much more complex and problematic. But let us start with a definition. What is peace? What is our understanding? We all have our own subjective understanding of what peace is. It involves the absence of war, terrorism, ceasefire, surrenders, and treaties. It embodies ideals such as harmony, freedom, good relations, and prosperity. So, what is peace? It refers to peaceful relationships between countries, between Ukraine and Russia, between host communities, individuals, stakeholder groups, industry, and the tourists. The existence of tourism depends, of course, on a number of points. Proponents of tourism for peace claim that tourism is a force and an agent of peace. It can be used as a tool for world peace because we can promote peace and combat conflicts. Tourism fosters stability and peace, according to the United Nations. It opens our minds and our hearts. So tourism, is it the spirit of hope and peace? Well, we know it creates jobs. We know it promotes cultural understanding and peace. And of course, it may bring hope to Ukrainians. Tourism is not only the world's biggest business, but also the world's biggest peace industry. It's a positive force that mitigates tensions, playing a central role in national and international politics. Peace disturbed due to political hostilities between nations like Russia and Ukraine can be restored through tourism. Can it? The role of tourism in countering fundamental causes of conflict and violence needs to be examined. Is there any evidence? Well, the growth of tourism in Croatia, of course, and the Balkans conflict and the dramatic rise in revenues in the decade following the war is some evidence. Travel industry is good for the earth and children and the future. And this is what Bill Clinton is paraphrasing, that I believe that simply by expanding tourism and in ways that promote sustainable tourism, it reminds people of our common humanity. So it's regarded as a vehicle for economic and social development. More tourism means more jobs, more revenue, and more peace. Tourism is good for peace, and peace, of course, is good for tourism. The connection is two-way. But there are also critical voices of the role of tourism. Tourism is based on the exploitation of the host destination and its people. The commercialization of tourism generates big profits for the multinational corporation. In other words, it only benefits a few. And tragically, in the recent past, somehow, popular destinations have experienced tourist deadly acts of terrorism, such as bombing, shootings, and taking hostages, of course. But The world at the moment is experiencing seismic changes and is affecting all of us. Tourism's ability to play a major role in achieving the United Nations ambition to transform the world is problematic for several reasons, including increased poverty. We've just heard the previous speaker talking about the Syrian issue and the Syria in Israel, COVID-19 pandemic, global tensions between West and East, and of course, the Ukrainian war. And my conclusion is that as we move throughout the world and learn to know each other better, we are building a level of international understanding which can improve the attitude for world peace. I don't know whether you're aware, there is a petition, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, making tourism a force for peace. And I'm calling you here for your support, for those who have not signed it, if you can sign it. And it's just a call on members to suspend any business operations they have with Russia. A call on academics and their research institutions to suspend any activities they have with Russia. And not to travel to Russia until military aggression, it says, this is very important. Putin only understands with sanctions. The invitation is open to all who are against this invasion. If you support this petition, please, please sign it. Let's make tourism a force for peace until justice being served. Thank you, Michael Apollo, Michael Hall, and Eugenia Wickens for initiating this petition. And let us make tourism a force for peace until justice has been served. Let us make the world safe for tourism. Make tourism a laboratory of peace and cultural understanding. And our final thoughts on behalf of OTS are with Ukrainians. Please, please stay safe, standing for peace with independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eugenia, for your words about the world's biggest peace industry. Much appreciated. Once again, if anybody has questions, please pop them into the chat room and we'll come to those after our final two speakers. Now, our second last speaker, we're returning to Timothy Marshall, who's in New York today. Timothy has served as the board chairman of the International Institute for Peace through Tourism since 1997. In this role, he's addressed many global summits at the United Nations in Geneva and throughout Africa and Asia and the Middle East on a range of economic and environmental and cultural sustainability issues of the tourism sector. He established a national economic development pilot program for the Clinton Foundation, and he is also father and an ordained deacon in the Baptist Church. Let me hand over to Timothy now. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, sir. And hello again, everyone. I just have to say that all of the speakers today and what we've heard has been really excellent and powerful and moving. So this has really been a very, very important session. And it caused me to think that it might be useful to just take a brief moment to revisit why the International Institute for Peace through Tourism was founded and what was going on at the time. The year was 1986, the UN International Year of Peace, and IIPT was founded as a response from the travel and tourism industry to the peaking of terrorism in the mid-1980s. And this was also a time where there were growing tensions between East and West. There was a deteriorating environment, and there was a growing gap between the have and have not regions of the world. So IIPT's mission is very simply to help bring about a peaceful and sustainable world through tourism initiatives, which contribute to international understanding and cooperation, which help to build an improved quality of environment, the preservation of heritage, and poverty reduction. And all of these are very timely issues as it relates to Ukraine. The notion was that the world's largest industry, travel and tourism, had to play a vital role in achieving global peace. Our motto is, every traveler is potentially an ambassador for peace. So I just wanted to share that quick background. So let me now say that IIPT has joined the rest of the world in falling in love with the Ukrainian people. And secondly, having our hearts broken as we've seen the innocent lives of pregnant mothers, babies, fathers, children, grandparents, and soldiers senselessly killed and placed into mass graves. Seeing homes, schools, hospitals, and cultural and civic institutions leveled to the ground. Again, we ask for what? And then seeing mothers, children, and senior citizens having to flee Ukraine as refugees, sometimes in the dead of night, as they fled war and sought safety. So I should note here that while IIPT is an institution which is dedicated to global peace, we do not have a passive approach to peace. Over the past 37 years, we've established chapters around the world which are engaged in programmatic initiatives on the ground. We've also built a network of strategic partners where we're mutually supportive of each other's programs. These partnerships have ranged from airline ambassadors who've shown up around the world during times of natural disasters to provide food, clothing, and water, to another organization called Just a Drop, which has helped to dig wells and provide water to regions of the world where there was no access to water, to a group of global ambassadors. And one example I would like to include is Ms. Claire McFarland, who has been trekking across the globe to build awareness about domestic violence. So these are just a few examples of how we try to actualize peace in people's daily lives. Now, not long after the invasion, IIPT issued a statement calling for leaders and people of goodwill to stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, the UN Secretary General, the UNWTO, and IIPT to call for diplomacy rather than war and atrocities. It is clear to all of us that that path has not yet been realized. So what do? It is incumbent upon the entire global community to do all we can to make things better on the ground. So in that regard, IIPT is pursuing the following short-term and long-term strategy to support the people of Ukraine and ultimately support the rebuilding of a peaceful society. The first short-term strategy includes another one of our strategic partners, which I mentioned previously. For quite some time, IIPT has worked closely with SCAL International, a leading hospitality industry group, to establish international peace cities and towns around the world in countries ranging from Romania to South Africa to China. During our dedication of Bucharest, Romania, we planted 12 trees as a symbol of peace, endurance, and rejuvenation. This was designated as a Bosco Sacro, which is a peace grove. There were 20 young members of SCAL who attended from Germany, Bulgaria, Turkey, Sweden, Finland, Spain, Italy, and Belgium, along with PhD students from Bucharest University of Economic Studies. Now, SCAL International has established an emergency aid committee to assist thousands of Ukrainian refugees crossing borders in Europe, where SCAL clubs exist, and they are preparing to support in the reconstruction of Ukraine after the war. This aid committee will be working closely with the Untitled Chapter in Bucharest to assist with food supply, transportation to neighboring countries to help refugees reach the next point of stay, and they're organizing volunteers. They will also work with UNICEF to assist with the well-being of Ukrainian children. IPT is supporting SCOL by posting information about this important initiative on our website, informing our chapters and global network about this important work, and mobilizing them into supporting these activities on the ground and using their various information and communications channels to support SCOL's important work. Secondly, as a couple of the speakers has referenced, Ukraine has a wonderful small business community, so IPT will help promote small Ukrainian.
Een van my best driver het net vir my nog gebel, maar
IPT will help promote small Ukrainian companies that are doing their best by offering services, products, clothing, and technology to help keep the Ukrainian economy alive until the war is over. So that is our short-term strategy. Our long-term strategy includes providing support during the rebuilding of Ukraine. One of our international towns of peace has served as a model of best practices in addressing global poverty and as an inclusive growth portal. This project was initiated by the World Bank, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, the Asia Development Bank, and the International Poverty Reduction Center. We believe there could be lessons learned and perhaps some aspects could be replicated into an environmentally friendly model as Ukraine begins its rebuilding campaign after the war. Finally, with the approval of the minister, IPT would like to propose the dedication of Kyiv as an international city of peace and Kharkiv as a site of an IPT Global Peace Park dedication after the war. IPT has established over 450 peace parks on 6 of the 7 continents around the world, including at Victoria Falls in Zambia, as Brother Ben noted. Zambia won its battle over colonialism in Africa under Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, Zambia's first president. And we are honored that he participated in our dedication ceremony at Victoria Falls. Now, we also believe that one of our installations on the grounds of the Pennsylvania State Capitol would be a great template for a global peace park in Ukraine. In Pennsylvania, we have a memorial in honor of African-American citizens whose homes and communities were seized to build the state capitol. This site has significant historical value because it was also the location of what was called the Underground Railroad, which was the route African-American slaves used to escape the institution of slavery. We have life-size statues of leading African-Americans, which has been erected as a monument to those heroes and sheroes. We would like to explore the creation of such a monument to be included in the proposed Global Peace Park in Kharkiv. In closing, I would like to share that in the dedication of our cities of peace in Jamaica, our theme was the right to peace, the way forward. We believe that this is an important message to come out of this important forum today, and one we might use going forward in our struggle for peace in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Timothy. I might ask if Mariana, are you still online? And if Mariana would like to make any comment in relation to Timothy's office?
No, thanks. I don't have exactly comments at the moment, but thank you for all the speakers and for the petition. That is a very good petition, I think. And at the moment, again, I want to say that we all are hoping for the peace in the nearest future and for the democratic way of development of Russia. As soon as they change their way of development and we see there is no threat to the world, of course, then we would need to build another relations with that country. But you know, as it was in many other wars in previous times, we see countries being now in pretty good relationship, but only when this past is in the right way reconsidered by the country. When we saw it with Germany, with many other countries. In that case, of course, we need to build those relations. But when, unfortunately, we don't see any close yet way of changing I think we are in the pretty middle. Thank you.
The direction, yes. Thank you very much, Mariana. Our final speaker is Dr. Talib Rafai, who's in Spain today. And for those of you who are not familiar with Talib, he's a superstar in global tourism and former Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. He also served as a minister in various portfolios in the government of Jordan, and has had an extensive background also with the International Labour Organization. Talib, may we invite you to say some words as the final speaker today?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to start by thanking IIPT for this very important occasion that we all meet here, discuss. I'm sorry my voice is not very loud, but I hope it's clear. Is it?
Yes.
It is. Thank you. Okay. I want to start by two things. Say that tourism can contribute to peace in two ways. One in a direct way and another in an indirect way. Direct way is the industry itself puts its services in the helm of tourism, of peace. For example, when Airbnb and other hotels open their doors for tourists, refugees, and everybody else, that's a direct contribution. When tourism as an industry contributes to rebuilding Ukraine and other places, that's a contribution of direct impact. But the more important part is the indirect one that Aziz has referred to, when he said that Martin Luther King Jr. said something very important. We hate each other as human beings. Now, the best way of combating hate is to get to know each other. We get to know each other through visiting each other. That's the most important thing. We have to visit each other, even those who disagree with us, even those that don't have the same points of view that we have about each other. For example, when I was Secretary General of UNWTO, I went and visited North Korea, went and visited Cuba, visited Russia, of course, visited many countries that are controversial. But the idea is that we should encourage more people to go to these countries, to talk to the people, because the real change happens from the people of that country. Now, I want to thank Ukraine for giving us the opportunity of meeting here today. But I also want to be a bit on the side of the people that raise the issue of why Ukraine, not other places. Why are we all rallying against Ukraine invasion? And it's not rally against, Iraq, for example, or Afghanistan. That's an important question to be asked. But I understand now that Ukraine is in the heart of Europe, and Europe is a very pivotal continent when it comes to world peace. So we have to be considerate of that. I want to thank Ukraine for highlighting these issues. My heart goes with the people of Ukraine. I know that. I also go for the people that are families of the soldiers that are there, Russian soldiers and Ukraine soldiers all together. So I think they're also suffering from being part of this, victims of this conflict. Now, I want to add my voice to that of Aziz in saying there are other conflicts in the world. The world has not stood up for them just as they did for Ukraine. The United Nations is not playing its role. The multilateral system altogether is being questioned now. And it's being questioned for good reason, because there is a double standard here. And I'm sorry to say this, but the people of Ukraine must understand that the rest of the world look at them as Europeans. And Europe has not been playing a very important and positive role in the world today. When we talk about slavery in Africa, for example, we talk about the European role there. It's therefore very important for us to have a broader view of the thing and not use sanctions as a means of solving conflicts. Sanctions have been imposed on Iran for a long period of time. That's not changed anything in Iran. That strengthened the regime there, actually. Because sanctions do not affect the governments, they affect the people mainly. So my plea to you in Ukraine now is please open your eyes, open your hearts, just like every tourist must do. Tourism is seeing people and meeting people. You can never ever hate or have negative stereotypes. People you had dinner with, listen to their stories, listen to their music. They are people, people are people all over the world, and the world is one place. Just wanted to say this. Thank you very much, and I want to add my voice to that of Aziz and the lady before him that talked about other conflict places in this world. Must never forget that while we keep Ukraine in our hearts and in our mind, it's important that I be very honest with you. In our part of the world, I come from the Middle East, in our part of the world, they don't see it the same way other people in the world may see it, especially not in Europe. But that's a fact we need to reckon with, because the more people visit each other, the more they will understand each other. And that's important. Thank you so much. Thank you and for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Talib, for your considered words and your experience and your observations from very practical experiences that you've had during your life as a diplomat and as a proponent for the good things that tourism can bring to our planet. Folks, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Sergey from Kiev to say a few words, and then Saba will ask you to say a couple of words also. Saba is from Georgia. But Sergey, can you hear me from Kiev?
Yes, I can. Many thanks. Yeah, here I am. Okay, thank you very much. I represent Chernobyl University and Chernobyl Tour Company, and I would like to just briefly share our practical experience, so to say, from the front line of defining the role of tourism in war. Just to give you the picture, the place where we worked, fortunately, is now liberated, but it is still filled with landmines and the claymores, and also it needs totally new radiation monitoring because the radiation monitoring control was disrupted. Some radiation masses were moved. But hopefully it will bring not much additional radiation, but it should be checked. And it demands time. Our tourist information centers were looted and one destroyed. But we are lucky because we succeeded in keeping our team as a team, and now we are working on restoration of our information centers there. But speaking of the role of tourism, this particular conflict has added new features because it just happened so that our tour business directly participated in the defense of the country. It just happened so that our tourist information centers were located at the checkpoint of the zone. And this was the place where all Russian troops, through which all Russian troops passed by on their way when they were trying to assault Kiev. And we had video cameras, and our workers monitored all the troops 24/7, and those intelligence was directly delivered to the armed forces of Ukraine. And I believe it grossly contributed to the defeat of the Russian troops and to the victory in the battle for Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And of course, I am not mentioning financial and material support of the Ukrainian army. Then we provided aid in evacuation of people, in the accommodation, and in the delivery of food and goods necessary both at the affected regions and for the refugees. Right now, we start an important program of psychological aid for the survivors. First of all, this program is focused at the area adjacent to the Chernobyl zone, for which we, at the first stage after liberation, we provided them just with material aid, and then we realized it's a big problem. And so what we are doing now is reorientation of all our company, all its resources and logistic structure for providing psychological aid for the survivors. And of course, in this, we need both support, both in form of advice and in finances, in financing this activity. And well, obviously, the last task is the revival, economic and social, of the areas of and population affected through the means of tourism, using all our expertise. And we grossly hope and rely on the support of international tourist community, both practitioners and academics. And we invite you to join this effort of defense of our country and of democratic civilized world at the lands and the waters of Ukraine, and also in future restoration and the prosperity of our country as one of civilized countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergey. I'm going to move straight on to Saba. Saba is a pioneer of tourism in Georgia immediately after the breakdown of the USSR in 1992. And he's going to make some contributions about his experiences rebuilding tourism after the Russian invasion. Saba, can you hear me okay? Saba?
Unmute yourself, Saba, please. Okay, I think
Saba's not there.
it's not there. Okay.
Let me, sorry to interrupt. I have his phone number. I will give him a call. Maybe it's out of the room.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I would like also to add, thank you so much, Sergey, that we have a cooperation, and actually the agreement with Sergey with the Chernobyl peace tours that we have started. I visited him in the summer, and they are doing a great job. They have also they established a training center for the tour guides in Chernobyl, but unfortunately now everything has stopped because of the war. But I look forward to go back to Chernobyl with Sergey, and so we can start back our peace tours, which is very important place, Chernobyl. Unfortunately, we were talking with Sergey about this, that people that come to Chernobyl should not come just for sightseeing and selfie. They should learn, and they should learn from the lessons from the history. But we see that we still didn't learn. So hopefully soon will be a peace and we can restart our work again.
Let me add a little bit about Chernobyl also, that really people should visit such places, because when they travel with Chernobyl tour or any other authorized tour operator, they know the rules about exclusion zone. And maybe you know that Russian tourists were in the most polluted area, hiding there, in the land, which is polluted highly. And of course, this is like for these people, they have maybe 1 more year to live, some of them or not. I don't know. And while we're waiting for another speaker, let me just briefly comment what Talib Rafai was talking about. I totally understand that feeling of many other countries that went through war and were not maybe paid enough of attention. And this should be for the whole world another chance to react immediately. And for us, we go through the war 8 years. It's 8 years.
A wake-up call.
Yes.
Wake-up call.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our people are dying in Ukraine, and we also were kind of so from now, I think that we need to pay attention to all the conflicts. And of course, just because it was maybe loud because of the technologies, because of the timing, because of the first maybe war that goes on real time, people take pictures immediately because of the high internet connection in Ukraine. The whole world is immediately informed, and because of the people who have access to internet everywhere. But this is just a first step for all of us to stop something like this, that it would be the last war in the world at all. That would be, I think, the best thing for all of us.
I hope so. Sincerely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's check if Saba has joined us. Saba?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, great. Over to you.
Where
are you, Saba? Just explain where you are.
I'm in Tbilisi. I'm from Georgia.
Good.
I'm CEO of and the founder of Georgian Hospitality Group. A few inbound operating companies, also some international brands, and well, very much in hospitality industry, let's say, and other things too. But this is the main profile. So I was a head of Georgian government, the tourism administration of the Georgian government in the very beginning of our, let's say, efforts. And then, of course, I'm from the country which experienced extremes, or let's say disasters, caused by Russian occupation. Of course, what is experiencing now Ukraine is like, devastation, negative energy, or whatever. I mean, war breaks, disaster. The devastation is about 10, 20 times bigger than we experienced. But, I should say that these guys, you guys, Mariana, you are doing this great thing. You're not only defending yourself, you're just changing the world. And probably you're first to make a step to the new world in a certain aspect, because that era should go away when people tend to close their eyes, not to mention obvious things. I don't want to go to politics too much, but just to remember that when the first, you just said that the internet changed the world. It's true, but in the time of our war in 2008, we still had the internet. There was the internet, but not, of course, not as developed as now or other communication means, but what we all witnessed, probably all of you. First videos or first reports or videos distributed around the world in 90% of the cases. The first movies about Georgia, or let's say about this war, was fake. It was the movie, it was the photos or videos from our city of Gori, bombed by by shell. I mean, the special kind of different bombs. I'm not very specialist of it. They're the same ones. We call it cassette bombs or whatever. And these videos was actually promoted or sold by Russian propaganda as a Georgians bombing Skim Valley. I mean, the area which pretended to separatist area. Anyway, let me focus on tourists because that's why we are all here. In fact, I already give a message to Mariana that I just want to say that there are really practical things to be done as soon as possible. I mean, this war will be hopefully soon over because you are doing very well. And the old world, I mean, all world is looking for you and helping you. I mean, most of the world, and we want to have that ended up as soon as possible, and it will happen. So, and I don't know what it will take, months, couple of months, I don't know, half a year. Still, you have to think, and that's why all these nice people are together about the tourism, how it will restart again. We have that experience. Of course, that our experience coming out of the devastation was about, you know, as I told, devastation was about 20 times less, and I hope it will be the same rate still. No more. We'll help. We'll try to help you as much as we can because, you know, we were, of course, you couldn't do the business as usual anymore, especially when you're talking with your Russian neighbors, and same with us. By the way, we did some unusual political decision. Our that time president Saakashvili made a decision to open, just vice versa decision in 2000 something, and after war, just a couple of years after war, the decision was made to open the borders to Russians to understand and to see and display how better Georgia is, and I mean just to show the Georgian success. I don't know. That was very risky, and but it worked somehow. I would say. Well, let's keep neutral position on that. But I think that is probably not the case now because it's even it's just 100 times more violence or 10 times. It's the same, but with very big scale. Anyway, it's up to you. But what I wanted to say that all the whole Georgian nation is just with you, and expressing love, and I'm trying to do it from my side, and my colleagues and the partners and the professionals, and we can really help you. I mean, personally, of course, government-wise, they can do their job, but as a private sector representative, I'm intending really to come and support inbound tour operations there in Ukraine, in terms of providing them that very, very sophisticated and dedicated operational software, which will be introduced to the world very soon. Of course, it's a commercial. Of course, it's something to be sold successfully around the countries, and we will announce it soon. I mean, it's called Tour Builder, but we made a decision with our friends to offer it free, all recommended. I mean, free without any fees or monthly fees or yearly fees, whatever, for a few years to Ukrainian companies in inbound tourists to restart and manage their businesses and operate it in a very, very appropriate manner, and I mean, answer the needs which will grow every day, as I witnessed when we restarted our business in 2009 after 2008 disaster. So that's what I wanted to say. I think you guys need very practical help. You probably will witness that less people will come back to that business, the tourism. I mean, most probably at the beginning, because it's so vulnerable and so fragile. And there will be a lot of other things to do. You have to rebuild your country, but whoever will be in tourism, I'm personally promising in my companies that we will be with you, and on spot, on distance, we will very much help, and with the sponsorship of IT, our property, to revive and give you some practical suggestion how to build the tour operations again. And of course, the profile will be generally the same, but you have to leverage. You have to leverage whatever. I mean, it's hard to say that, well, some terrible and tragical sites will become the must to see places. And that we will, I mean, you have to do that. And I mean, we had a different situation, not as disastrous as you. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, concept and how to approach it is not to forget it, but just display it properly. What happened in the modern days in the 21st century, Ukraine, and do it professionally in the proper measures, in proper, let's say, concept, and we will try our best to be on your side. And I know you have fantastic professionals, and generally we are just like energized by your energy. And so Slava Ukraini.
Saba, thank you. Mariana, are you there? Would you like to say any words in response to Saba?
Heroyam
Mariana?
Glory to the heroes, as a reply for the, and yes, we know that Georgian people are, because they went, like, for all of the country that went through this type of invasion of Russia, they were smaller scale, of course, but it's the same. They know what we are talking about. It's easier to understand. And I'm sure that with the whole world and with the whole tourism industry, we will be able to make sure that there will be peace in the world forever, I hope.
Thank you, Mariana. Ladies and gentlemen, we all need to work harder to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbours all over the world. So thank you very much for your contributions tonight. We're running out of time. I'm going to hand back to Reza to do some final words and wrap up our webinar for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve. Steve is in Sydney now. I think it's 1 a.m. So thank you so much for staying awake. Also, Freya is in Australia. It's quite late. I see lots of other friends. Talib is always with us. Thank you so much. I see Ludo Amor here, the president and the founder of the International Institute for Peace through Tourism. 36 years he has been promoting peace through tourism. So you can see everything about him and about the IIPT also on the website of the IIPT or on the tourism webinar. And Mariana, thank you so much. In fact, I did an interview with her a few weeks ago. It was a bombardment and she was in the basement, I think. And so it is very difficult, especially for the women with the children. They really suffering. So let's us hope and pray that they get through this difficult time. And hopefully the next time that we make a webinar, as usual, it is how we can promote Ukraine tourism. So hopefully we will soon think about rebuilding this beautiful and lovely country. Very nice people, good food, beautiful, beautiful, really. I've been many times there, and in fact, I have to say that I personally didn't learn Ukrainian. I speak some Russians, and I never had a problem. And I say this to my Russian friends. In Ukraine, you don't have a problem if you speak Russian. So don't watch always the TV. This is not true. I have been maybe more than 20 times, and I spoke Russians from Lviv to Kharkiv, and nobody said anything wrong to me. So they're really friendly and peaceful people. So I will say also Slava Ukraina, and I don't know if there are other people who want to have any comments here. Gail, do you want to say something?
Who did you ask then, Reza?
Gail. Anybody want to say something before we close the webinar?
Thank you, Reza. I would like to extend a vote of thanks to you and to Steve and to all the speakers. And I think it's been extremely enlightening, and to have the caliber of the speakers that you have had today and tonight has really opened up our eyes and repositions what we all are trying to do in each and every way in a very small part. And of course, acknowledgement to Louis D'Amour, who is the father and instigator of all this. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, any remarks?
Okay, may I have
Yes,
1 minute?
please. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Reza. I would like to say thank you to all of you. And of course, we have the same direction. I do not need to repeat what has been said several times. I know Reza, I know Louis D'Amour since long years, and I love what he is doing. And of course, we need to continue in a real concrete form. I want to say 2 different things. One is I'm in Germany. And so here in Germany, we have a lot of refugees already from Ukraine. And so the next railway station, the next big railway station after Warsaw in Poland is Berlin. And in Berlin, there are hundreds of Russian people helping Ukrainians. So a lot of Russians are victims of Russian fake news. But there are much more Russians, at least outside of Russia, who do not believe this. These people, these Russians who does not believe it, they are quiet. They are not make any demonstrations pro-Putin and so on. They are quiet, they are simply help. And we have in Germany about 3.2 million Russians, 3.2 million Russians in Germany. And we have had demonstrations from pro-Putin Russians and also pro-Putin Germans in several cities in Germany, which have been 13,000. So compare this 13,000 to 3.2 million. Of course, both numbers are not representative, but just to show that there are a lot of Russians here in Germany, also here in my little place, in my city, who are helping Ukrainian refugees here by giving them a room, food, administrative support, translation support, and so on. I just want to say this. Number 2, my intention is to start with the tourism stakeholders, an international chamber of travel and tourism, a roof organization of the tourism organizations from hospitality to diving, from tour guides to safari, whatever. So, and one of these initiatives of this chamber should be an international association for peace through travel and tourism, an association supporting the aims and targets of the IIPT, which has been started by Louis D'Amour some years ago. Of course, I cannot do this alone. I have some people who want to help me. This is a little bit music of the future. It cannot happen by pushing a button. Of course, it needs some money to do so. Without money, we can do nothing. But I want to, it is very, very normal and very logical that the tourist industry needs peace, and peace needs tourism as well. But what has been said here in this discussion, maybe 10 times, that the tourist industry is the world's largest employer. This is absolutely not known out there. It is not known in the political world, it is not known in the financial world, and it is not known in the societies. It is also not known by the tourists, by the tourists.
You're right, you're right.
And once I had a chance for 10 minutes to speak to Talib. It was in the Nepal reception of the Ministry of Tourism of Nepal in Berlin in 2019. And he fully said, Burkhard, this is exactly what is needed, but I cannot do this alone. I need people helping me. I have the power. I'm the mental power. I have a database. I'm the editor of the World Tourism Directory. We can start with this to get the International Chamber of Travel and Tourism done. And what is needed that the private sector. The private sector need to have a voice. And of course, they need to support areas where is a conflict, like in Ukraine now. In another year, it can be another area. And if we just give 10 cents per interaction, per ticket, per hotel voucher, just 10 cents, this will be a huge amount of money, which is able to help companies who are suffering and partner companies in tourism, and to help them to rebuild it, like what Saba said before. So now I close my mouth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Talib, do you want to add something before we closing?
Just want to thank our last speaker. I think he's absolutely right. But I want to add something else. Is the fact that I want to thank Mariana for being with us tonight, for providing us with this opportunity to speak about Ukraine. Our hearts are with Ukraine. I just want to make that very clear, regardless of what everybody said. And we need to be all together in this, because tourism is about people meeting each other, people interacting with each other. That's what tourism is all about. Thank you so much, Reza. Thank you. Thank you, Louis Damori, for being with us. Thank you, Louis. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Mariana, for being here. We are really thinking about you and the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Sergey. Thank you, Lou D'Amour, and everybody else here. So thank you so much. The recording will be also on the website in the coming 1 hour or two. So I will send it to you via email as well. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Reza.
Thank you.